make the movie because you want to make the movie as good as possible and make it as good as possible, you can't predict the future. So if you make a great movie, get it in front of people, then people will recognize that, and then you get that next step. But if you're making a movie strictly for the idea that somebody's going to give you that next opportunity, you're not going about it the right way. This episode is sponsored by Pelleplat and Craftsman Films.
Welcome back.
Yeah, here we go. Welcome back. It feels like it's been a while because, you've done an episode or two on your own, and then I've been busy shadowing this director on a film set and then working on Remnant and getting things going there on the development side. So how are you doing? What's going on with your projects?
It really does feel like a minute. Things are going really well. I'm about to go into full prep on, actually probably by the time this episode airs, I'll be in full prep on a project which I think we can comfortably say the name now. It's called Blue Box. And we are going to camera in August. And we are right now in the thick of pre-production, which is sort of fun. It's neat to get back into the swing of making a film again, which is sort of very cool. And it's going really well. And it's kind of funny because it's like everything, like I think we were talking about this maybe a few weeks ago, where when everything comes up, you get films, so many projects coming in all at once. So, we've had this project that's called Blue Box that I've been working on all year and haven't really been able to talk about. And now it's something that my partner and I are producing together and putting all those pieces together. There's a little international component to it. So dealing with all of the visas and permits and all this other fun stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's probably like a great just learning experience as well, if you've never made a film like that before.
Right. Yeah. Dealing with, working on and seeing what you need to do to really like put all these kind of little pieces together, and also looking for, just like we've been talking about with indie film, finding ways to save a little bit of money here and, $100 here or $200 here, and figuring out like, how do you put together a movie that you really want to be good, but especially from the producing side, knowing that you have to really like balance that aspect of creativity versus what the resources will allow us to do. Just trying to find a really, really good medium for that, and understanding that, it's not my money to spend. It belongs to other people, and we have to find a way to spend it properly and appropriately, and make sure that that in the end there's a really good movie at the end of it. Because as we've been saying, the most expensive movie is a movie that doesn't get finished.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And how are you liking the producing side of it? Because this is ultimately a bit of a service job as well, right? This is like through your company, you're producing for a studio or a streamer. And how has that experience been, taking this on and putting together the crew and handling all of that?
That is definitely an interesting process, because we're part of the creative elements of things, but we are definitely in the logistics and producing and hiring phases and like contacting vendors. I would say it's a really great learning experience. Like the challenge of this is fantastic, because it allows us to work on further developing relationships with various people, but also just it's allowing us to really take a step back and go, okay, if we applied some of the techniques that we're figuring out here to our own projects, what would we take with us, and what would we adapt to make work in, for example, the Quiet Canadians? Because the budget level that we're looking at for Quiet Canadians is in the same world as this one. So we're kind of figuring out what the stress will bear.
It's kind of a test run in a way.
Yeah, a bit. But we can divorce ourselves from the having to direct side of things and having to rewrite the script side of things, and just focus on, okay, for the same amount of money, this is what we're trying to accomplish with this film. What do we need to keep in mind for the Quiet Canadians, and how do we approach it in a way that uses the same kind of approach, where trying to get the best people you can get, trying to make sure everybody's being paid, but also understanding like, hey, we're not going to have big teams of departments. It's going to be a very small, tight-knit indie crew. We'll find out. I guess the truth will bear is what's realistic. Is this realistic? Can we produce something good at this budget level?
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure you can. You guys have tons of experience. You have a great team on board. And at that budget level, yeah, you'll be able to pull it off. Well, I look forward to hearing more about it as you get further into it. You go to camera in August, you were saying?
On August 18th. Yeah. Segueing over to you, like when do you go to camera on Remnant?
Yeah, so right now we are still slated to prep in September with a shoot in October for 20 days. We have been working really hard over the last few weeks, getting more investors on board, location scouting. We had a super successful location scout last weekend. I think I found the perfect house. I don't want to get too ahead of myself right now because the deal isn't closed, but we are negotiating with the owners right now, and it is the perfect horror house. I got so excited going down the driveway and seeing it. And our production designer, director of photography, everybody's on board, very excited about it. So that's going very, very well. Yeah, talking to a couple other potential investors and looking at models and ways to maximize our budget right now based on the number that we're trying to hit. So all in all, everything is going in the right direction. I just can't say for certain at this moment, at the time of this recording, that we are for sure going forward with the plan of at the budget level in September and October. Right now, that is our North Star, and I'm going to know by the end of this summer if it's happening. And look, all signs are pointing to yes. And we're going to make this thing, we're going to figure this out no matter what. Even if I have $20,000, even if I have to put in $10,000, and that's the movie, a $10,000 micro budget feature, we'll figure out how to make this movie. It's very exciting. And it's not going to be that, by the way. I'm very confident that everything's coming together the way as it should. Every day there's some just great progress, and we're all very happy. Yeah, it's exciting.
It's a lot like what Zach was talking about on on last week's episode with regards to that idea of like, you have whatever you have available to you is the budget of the movie. You might have a plan A budget that might be at a different level, but if you don't hit that, you already know what your sort of minimum viable budget is to get going, and you've got that in your pocket. So you've got a movie to make.
We have that. We have access to equipment, we have cast, we have locations, we have department heads and crew that want to work with us. It's like we have everything we need. At a certain point, when you have that, the money actually does come in because you've shown that you have this built-in capital already in the film of like, well, just if we could just pay people, you're going to have a good-looking movie on your hands. And investors will go, oh my God, yeah, you have these people and this location. Look at that. This is amazing. The funny thing about making a movie is that what I'm finding is that you don't just tackle one problem here and solve that and then tackle another problem. You're building this movie across all these different elements at the same time, and it's just slowly moving forward and getting closer and getting tighter until finally you just have the movie set. And that goes for money, that goes for department heads, that goes for locations, that goes for casting, all of these elements, the script, your shot list. Everything is just being done at the same time, bit by bit, until it just solidifies into the movie. And we're just not at that solidified stage yet. We will be there very, very soon. And I'm going to talk all about it once we're there. But it's just funny to me how these movies come together, because you kind of just assume, well, I'm going to write the script first and then we're going to cast. And then when we're done casting, we're going to do this. And then we're going to do this in location scout. But no, you have to juggle everything at the same time.
There is no completing a loop at all in any of it. You're starting something and then finishing something else and moving on, and then nothing is ever finished until the movie's finally in the can anyway, right? So
yeah, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I always come back to it that Chad Stileski, who directed John Wick, has this analogy for the shape of a movie. And the shape of a movie is actually a spiral where you start on the outer ring and you're constantly having these conversations, and you have the same conversation, but it's a little bit more advanced. And then you have the same conversations over and over and over again, and you're just spiraling into the center until finally you reach it, and that's the movie that you're going to make. But you don't just solve a problem 12 weeks out from production. You're constantly having that same discussion about the locations, about the sets, about the budget, about the creative, about the casting, about everything over those 12 weeks until finally the problems that you're specifically talking about aren't the large scale, big picture problems that you talked about in week 12 of prep, but rather a very, very tiny minutia part of that location that you're talking about in the last week of prep, because everything else has already been sorted out. And so I think that shape of a movie is so apt.
That's a beautiful way to think about it, and it also it feels enormously overwhelming. I think to unfortunately, but it's that's what makes it magical. I think that's what makes making a film magical, and that's why everybody is always so there's so much exhaustion, but emotional and mental and physical exhaustion in making a movie, and I think that's probably why it attracts us types to that style is having continuous loops of discussion and activity and tasks and everything else, right brain left brain activity.
It's the ultimate problem solving experience, right? How do you make a movie? Okay, there's a million questions to answer, and then at the end of it, you'll have a movie. Speaking of questions, actually, today's episode, we are going to dive back into listener Q&A because we've been receiving a ton of questions from people over the last few weeks since our last Q&A episode. So we thought that we'd take a little bit of time today and go through some questions that we've received that we thought were really thoughtful, and hopefully provide some answers to help you on your independent film project, wherever you are and whatever you're working on. Just to make sure that things don't get too out of hand, I'm going to actually set a timer, and we're going to give ourselves just a little bit of a pressure here to answer these within 5 minutes. We have a bunch of questions to get through. So, Anthony, how do you feel about starting with question number 1?
So, what's the biggest mistake first-time independent directors make when working with department heads, and how can you avoid micromanaging while still maintaining your vision?
Great question. So, first-time indie directors making mistakes with department heads happens all the time, because also you've probably spent so much time working on this project. You've written the script. You've been working, meeting people, trying to put it together. Micromanaging can tend to happen, right? One of the things that you have to remember is that you've hired experts in their field to come aboard your film and handle that department. So a production designer, a director of photography, a sound mixer, a props master, set decorator. Hopefully you're hiring people in these positions that know more about those jobs than you do, right? That's also our goal as directors, is hire the experts, and so that they can bring amazing ideas to your film and elevate your film much further than it ever would have been if you had just done all of those tasks. So for me, it's trust the experts, hire really, really talented, strong, good people. I have a strong no assholes policy on my crews. So make sure they're nice, but make sure they're really, really good at their jobs and that they know way more than you about those jobs. That's my advice. What about you?
Basically, take a step back and encourage every department to ask you questions and to challenge you on the script. The idea being that if you set that tone where you say, look, I want you to challenge me. I want you to ask me, what color chair should this be, or what color shirt should this be? Because if I haven't thought about it, you'll make me think about it. That's what I would say if you're a first-time independent film director. I would say any director, because I'm sure this is not just related to first-time indie directors, because we all get into that state of micromanaging, and at all levels. I'm sure it happens on bigger budget too, but it's that idea of encouraging. Just develop that idea that encourage department heads to ask you questions and encourage them to challenge you. Because if you really do have the answers in your head, then it will help you learn to articulate those answers so that you get what you want. But also, if you haven't quite figured it out yet, it will also give you something to think about. Because you might have a costumer who comes to you and says, "I think this character is a character that wears blue all the time because of this, and this." And you might not even have thought of that as a color scheme or a color palette for that character. But even if you had, you might have said, no, I actually was thinking about it being purple for this reason. And that encourages a dialogue and a discussion about, okay, then let's gear things that way and move in the direction that makes the most sense. But having that open ability to allow your departments to question you and to challenge you, I think is very important. And that can be in a way that says, look, I still maintain my vision because I'm the one ultimately giving you the answers, but you're the one who's asking me the questions that I might not be thinking about.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think department heads, crew, your shuttle driver should be asking questions about the script and pushing back on the script. Everybody wants the movie to be as good as possible. And so when they're asking questions or picking little things apart or questioning a logic thing here or there, don't get offended by that. That's a good thing, right? It shows that they care and they want this to be as good as possible. Going back to your wardrobe example, it can also not have to do with a creative dilemma, but just a logistical one, where you've written a scene at, say, some sort of gala, and the protagonist is wearing this flowy dress, and you've written that she pulls out a letter. Well, where does the letter come from if she's wearing, this type of gown? And so now in the script is very easy. She pulls out a letter and reads the letter, but practically, how are you going to shoot this, and where does that letter come from? And so the costume designer has to figure this out. So you're constantly going to be getting questions, both creatively, practically, that you're going to have to solve as a director. And that's the fun of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Question number 2. How do you make low budget films feel cinematic? What are the top 3 production design tricks that give you the biggest bang for your buck? I'll also add just other ways to make the film seem cinematic, not just in production design. But what do you think?
In terms of production design, or in terms of, I guess, like what you see on the camera, I think what you have to do is you have to take every location and don't accept the location for what it gives you. So whether that's a room, like a bedroom or a dining room or whatever it is, or a bathroom or something, you should always be thinking, what can I do to make this particular set, enhance this particular set, or enhance the story elements in this particular set? So that could be something as simple as, on the dresser, there's a photo, and the photo is of the character's family, and that represents something, even if it's all deep in the background and it might never even show up. Something I remember thinking, and this is on a bigger budget production, but I think it could really apply. I saw behind the scenes of the Casino Royale production designer, and what they did was they said, when Daniel Craig's character is going through Vesper's belongings at the end of the movie, there's actually a whole bunch of stuff in those belongings that speak to the character of Vesper that never appear on camera. But you look through them, and all of a sudden you feel like the Daniel Craig was saying, like, when he looked through some of the other elements, and he suddenly learned more about Vesper as a character than he knew before. So he was able to actually internalize some of this, because obviously I always say the best production design, or the best production value, comes from your actors actually being able to perform and be given the space to perform. And that was an element where, because the environment was set up in a way where it felt so real, or there was so much texture in the props or texture in the set design, you actually start to feel that in your own character. And then the acting becomes more authentic and more real. So I would say, take care of the details, and the production design, those cinematic production design elements will be felt in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. Layering the production design, the set decoration. If you look at your own bedroom at home, you don't just have things perfectly placed and singular. You often have things piled up on top of each other, things that have been there for 6 months, sometimes a year, and there's a layering to the way we live our lives. And so that's important from a production design perspective. As far as lighting and lensing, let's just say you don't have very much money, and you don't have enough money to rent certain toys. You don't need a gigantic dolly, but you can still make a makeshift dolly through PVC pipe and skateboard tires and things like that. So if you still want movement, you can always find ways to add some movement and add some flair to your visual style. I shot a couple of short films just by myself, I didn't even have movie lights or anything. I went to a pet shop, or like an animal, supply store basically. And there's these dog collars that have LED lights in them, and they change from white, blue, green, red, and then like a blinking version. And I got this tip from my prop master friend, who's like one of the best in the country and does gigantic films, did like Inception. And he said, whenever he starts a movie, actually, we had him on the podcast, Dean Goodine. Whenever he starts a movie, he goes to these pet stores and he picks up these dog collars. They take them apart and take the LED lights, and that way they can put them into anything for little blinky blinks or, little lights. So I had these little lights wrapped up in birthday party tissue paper, and all of a sudden I had a key light with diffusion that I taped to my wall, and that was the way that I was able to get some high contrast lighting. So don't think that just because you don't have the money to get the certain lights or the camera equipment that you can't pull off some of these shots to add that cinematic touch to it. You can absolutely build your own way around this. Use a wheelchair to get a makeshift dolly, a handheld makeshift dolly, right? There's always ways to be creative and pull these things off. The one other way that I would add to having your film feel more cinematic is really focus on the transitions between scene to scene. That to me is the number one tell between an amateur director and a professional director. Being in the scene, anybody can do that. How you get in and out of a scene is what makes the director, in my opinion. And so really take time to figure out, are you entering that scene on an insert, through a sound effect, through pre-lap? What's the very first thing that we're seeing in that scene to introduce the scene, introduce the character, and what are you saying about it thematically? That is going to add so much cinematically to your movie.
That is such a good one, because I agree that that is the first telltale between like really well-made films and kind of let's just say like more like what tells you it's a micro-budget, low-budget film is that it's just a series of non-connected scenes that are slapped together in the edit, and you were just finding ways to time them properly. Whereas most movies have transitions that are actually just as significant to the film. Like, how does a character get from here to here? How does a story move from here to here? Like, how do you get? You don't want to show you want to show a character getting up in the morning. How do you get them from getting up in the morning to getting out the door in a storyful way of presenting it? And those thought processes are so essential. And you see it. I always see these sort of shots that I think to myself, I can't imagine even planning a shot like that. Like, I wouldn't have even thought to plan a shot like that. Like, it's a simple one of just someone, the way that scene exited, wasn't even the wouldn't have been a thought in my brain. And then I started thinking to myself, that's how I know I still need a lot of work on my directing ability, is like, oh, I need to think about that stuff much, much more. What is the most important thing indie filmmakers should know about working with actors when you can't afford big names or extensive rehearsal time?
Here's one. It's very simple. It's a very easy trick that anybody can do. Go to the bookstore and buy the book Directing Actors by Judith Weston. This is a must-read for any directors about to start directing actors. It is the Bible for how to direct an actor. There are shortcuts in there for how to get the performances that you want. If you don't have time for rehearsals, if you just don't have a lot of time in general, this is a way to learn how to be economic as far as your directing goes. One of the best ways to get a performance out of an actor is through verbs, right? And not just saying how somebody's feeling. Oh, you're being sad. What is sad? That's so subjective, right? But if you can give an actor a verb to latch onto, then that's an action that they can take into the scene with them. There are so many ways to give direction. This book is just chock full of them. I go back to this book all the time and reread it just to memorize it, make it a part of who I am as far as talking to actors. But I just can't recommend it enough. Directing Actors by Judith Weston.
Yeah, and I would say that when you don't have time and you don't have money for big rehearsals, I think one thing, it's a bit of a cheat, but try to see if you can have a conversation with your actor either in person, which is the best, or if it has to be over Zoom, and use that time to talk about character and talk about the story and talk about how you see the things going, and even better, learn how they see the character and have a discussion about it. You might not have time to go through the script. You might not have time to do rehearsals and to rehearse with different actors playing off each other. But if you can at least get a very good couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours over dinner or over coffee or something with the actor, talking about the script, talking about the story, talking about the character's journey, and then being available to answer questions about where they are at different points in the story, it's one way to sneak in maybe a little bit of a bonus rehearsal opportunity with an actor when you just don't have the time to do it. Like you don't have that 2 weeks of beautiful rehearsal time that you wish you had.
Yeah, it's true. So, where I was coming from was more along the lines of like, if you don't have a big name or a super experienced actor, this is a way to get a performance out of them. So definitely read the book. And you're totally right about just even if you can steal an hour or two to talk to them and map out the journey. I think one other thing I'll throw in there to piggyback on yours is when you meet an actor for the first time, don't start talking about the character. Let them talk first. What do you think about the character? Let them express how they feel about the character. They could be totally wrong. They could be so off base with where you want this character to go for the movie. But if you open it up for them to talk first, then they feel welcome at the table, and then they'll be able to pitch you ideas down the road. But if you just come in and you say, this is what it is, I don't have any other ways of looking at this, I don't respect your opinion, is ultimately the way that comes across. It's not going to work. You're not going to get a performance out of this actor. So invite them to the table by asking them what they think of the character, and then slowly guide it from there. One more thing, actually, that just came to mind, and we'll move on to the next question, is 90% of directing is casting. So just make sure that you're casting the right actor for the role. If you are casting somebody who just really doesn't ever feel like this character, it's going to be an uphill battle. Well, you don't want to spend your time on set working on an actor's performance to get it to just be acceptable. What you want to be doing on set is having the foundation of a great performance, but then taking it in all of these different directions and giving yourself options for the movie of like, oh, okay, well, that's a really interesting look you gave him. Let's explore that a little bit. That's what filmmaking is. You shouldn't be struggling just to get an actor's performance to feel like the character in the first place. That's where the casting comes in. And if you're doing that, you've probably cast the wrong actor.
Yeah, and to to piggyback on the casting part, I mean, when you're casting, be deliberate in your casting. Like, you have to look at an actor and go and think to yourself, A, do I see this person in the role? But also, does this person have acting ability? Like, are they have they put the work in? Have they put the time in? Do you see enough of a range in their performances? Even if you get them to do 2 takes of a performance in casting, are those 2 takes demonstrating a range, demonstrating an ability to go one place versus another place? Because, again, if you're not casting big names, sometimes that's actually a good thing, because first of all, I think you should cast to the level of a direct, cast just slightly above the level of a director that you that you see yourself as. Like, if I put George Clooney in my next film, that might be a great idea for the salespeople, but I don't know how to direct George Clooney.
Well, he's going to walk all over you, and I'm sure he's a lovely guy.
Yeah, and he might overwhelm the entire set, like he might overwhelm the entire experience. But when I'm casting actors, I'm casting actors who I feel like, okay, I see the performance, I see the movie in this person. And also, I can see where I can work with them on stuff because I can see what their range is. Don't try to assume that you are going to be able to elevate a performance if the cast member doesn't have that in them. If they're just not there.
Yeah, it's ultimately why I despise Zoom auditions. I despise self tapes. I think it's shit, because that actor could have spent 12 takes giving you the performance that the casting director ultimately sent in. And to you, you're watching 1 take or 2 takes, and they're like, oh, there's range there. But can they actually take direction? Well, no, not if they took 15 takes to get there. And so that's why in-person casting to me is and will always be better than self-tapes. But with COVID and everything, it changed. And I understand the necessity for self-tapes. People are out of town, and it does make things easier, but don't hire off of the self-tape. Find somebody who you think is good, and then do a live in-person Zoom audition if they're out of town, and only, just track how many takes it takes to get that actor there. If it's too long, then you're going to waste too much time on set.
It would be more romantic if they stayed together.
The door would not stay afloat.
It's a movie, not a documentary.
Are you insane, bro? It was a real life tragedy.
Why are you so obsessed with tragedy?
Here's an idea. Why don't the 2 of you take your hot takes to Pelleplat? They're holding a contest for people like you. Plus, there's cash prizes.
Game on.
So, who won?
She win.
We both won. Yeah, we found our people.
Perfect. By the way, what about the end of Inception?
Don't even.
No,
I know you're
listen,
gonna start,
no,
but I've told
no, you need to look at
Pelleplat Writing Challenges, where passionate minds meet. Join today at pelleplat.com.
Okay, burning question here. You've talked about films that never hit $1 million at the box office, but still made investors their money back. What's the realistic financial model indie filmmakers should be thinking about?
Yeah, this is very, very top of mind, right? I think obviously, you have to be economical with your resources in terms of like what the budget of the film is going to be, and you have to be realistic about what the budget of the film should be. I mean, if it's hard to make $1 million at the box office, which it is, that's a tough thing to slide. So then it's really important to think to yourself, okay, well, if $1 million is a hard threshold to hit, I've got to keep my budget level low and I've got to keep everything economical, or I've got to rely on those tax credits and grants and every other, product placement, sponsorships, every other sort of money that doesn't need to be repaid method of bringing in money for the film. So if you can crowdfund the film, that's money you don't have to pay back to investors. If you can crowdfund plus investor, and crowdfunding can take care of some of the shortfall, great. If telefilm can take care of some of that shortfall, great. If tax credits can help you, get you 33 budget that's 33% higher or 35% higher than what you would like to film with, then maybe if your $1 million budget is composed of 35% tax credits, then you only need $700,000 from an investor, and then $1 million becomes something that's actually almost, you're starting to get into we're making money world now.
Yeah, there are multiple models. I think you're right about all of those. I think if you are worried about making your money back for the investor, which obviously we have to worry about, it's our concern. We want our investors to make their money back plus whatever the rate of return is that we've promised them. The way to do that is have fewer investors in for less money and really put the movie together with soft money. So specifically looking at Canadian films, you want to maximize what you can get out of Telefilm, out of Creative BC, out of the other provincial organizations that can do that with tax credits. And then maybe your investor pool is $200,000. If you gross less than $1 million, you could probably get away with grossing $500,000 at the box office after distributor fees, after the theatrical cut. Maybe your investors are making money at that point. But that's really it. So there's no guarantee for how to make investors their money back. One other way to look at it would be through pre-sales, right? So if you can put your movie together through international pre-sales and get the commitment letters from all of the international distributors, at that point, somebody's going to have to write a check to cover what that commitment is. You could go to the bank, but then you're paying a ton of interest, or you could go to investors and promise them 10, 20, 25% on top of whatever that pre-sale value is. But you know that money is guaranteed once the movie's delivered. So ultimately, the investor's risk is much lower because the international distributor has already pre-sold the movie. And so it's basically a loan with a 10 to 25% return on investment if the theatrical run is successful. So that is another way to look at this. It's just to get international pre-sales, you need cast, you need a name, or you need a production company or producer that act as that 800-pound gorilla to get those deals in place in the first place. So that's a whole other ball game as to how to set up the movie that way.
Yeah, and that's the ever, the debate and the challenges that we're all facing, that we always face when we're putting together films, is how much do you basically say, okay, I got a person who's got $400,000, and that's where I'm at. And what can I build with that? What can I do with $400,000? Well, now I know I can do tax credits, and I know I can do some in-kind contributions, and I know I can do some deferrals. So now my budget's going up, but my investors are still only in for $400,000 at this moment. And I think you're right. I think, looking at the distribution plan, looking at your marketing plan, how are you going to get this out to market? Thinking about that while you're putting the film together is super important in order to give confidence to investors that this is a model that, while nothing is guaranteed, this is something that has a reasonable expectation that we should be able to earn something out of this film. It's the right genre. It's the right type of people. It's made the right way. And it's delivering on a promise in terms of what the premise of the story is. One thing I will say is, if you're making a horror film, make a horror film. Don't make a horror film and then make it a drama. Know what lane your film is in, and stick to that lane. Make sure you deliver that lane, because you will hurt yourself if you promise a slasher flick and you deliver a psychological thriller. Nobody's going to know how to market your film, and you need to know, and you need to give everybody the opportunity to market your film properly. And don't just try to toe both sides.
Okay, so next one. When should an indie filmmaker say no to a project or investor? What are the red flags that seem tempting but will hurt you long term?
This is a hard one, because when I saw this question, I thought to myself, okay, so what would, if someone flashed $1 million in front of me, would I take it? No questions asked. And I think the short answer is, and I don't know how you feel, Ken, but I definitely value the relationships and the partnerships that I build, no matter what they are, whether they're investors or sponsors or even just donors or crew members or cast members. It's like I kind of think of everybody in an equal belt of like, who do I want to spend my time with over the next 2 years putting together a project? And I know an investor that comes in with $1 million or comes in with the exact budget that I need to make my film. They're going to be a big part of my life now for the next little while. So I would say you're looking for compatibility. You're looking for, is this a good business relationship? Some of the tricks that I use sometimes just when I'm working with people is, how do they treat people around them? How do they treat when we go out for dinner? How do they treat the wait staff? How do they react when they get disappointed in something or when something doesn't go their way? Because those are little tells about how I feel this relationship's going to go. And I also think if there starts to be demands when we get to the contracting phase, if all of a sudden a whole bunch of new elements of like, oh, but I want this, oh, but I want this, oh, but I want this, I would say it's time to start thinking, okay, so how much is this person going to ask of me in the future if they're already asking of this stuff now?
Yeah, I think all of that's totally valid. For me too, you have to part of it's just intuition, your gut check on people. Picture yourself 6 months from now on a Tuesday afternoon at 3:00, and you're working on this movie. Do you want to be there? Can you see yourself there and still loving it as much as you possibly love it right now? Because it's going to be 2 years of your life minimum, ultimately. And so that's one thing. On the investor side of things, what if an investor came to you and said, "Here's $500,000. This will be enough to close the gap for your movie, and you're good. You're greenlit if you take this money. But I want you to change the ending to X." Then what do you do? Right? Is that a pitch that you can live with, or does that completely upend the movie? Because at the end of the day, if you're not making the movie that you set out to make, then is it worth working with this investor? Also, the investors, if they want to make their own movie, they should go out and make their own movie. They're trusting you to make the movie that you can deliver, and they're the fuel to your rocket. And so there has to be trust built in between the two of you for them to understand, okay, this is the type of movie these guys are making. I trust that they're going to deliver, and it's going to be good if they do that. I've heard of a horror story with one local director who had an investor out of New York with a hedge fund, and again, this investor was using other people's money to fund the movie, and I kid you not, pitched something along the lines of sort of a lesbian mud wrestling match in the climax of the movie, and it was just so bonkers and out there, and they were like, "No, we're not doing this. This is crazy." And they of course refused the money, because it didn't make any sense for the story. It was just some guy flexing his power, and it wouldn't have been good for the movie. So no, you have to learn how to say no sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's knowing your own value system. Like, you have to set your own integrity and value system of what both in terms of what your boundary is for the particular film you're working on. Like, you know what the vision of your film is. But obviously, if someone says, "Look, I'd like you to use my Porsche instead of a Lamborghini," are you open to that? You kind of go, "Well, okay, maybe that's a trade-off I'm willing to make, unless Porsche is like a key element of your movie." But but knowing your value system, knowing what you're willing to compromise on in terms of integrity of the film project, but also integrity of yourself. Like, you have to know, like, is this person, does the project or the person or the project, the people involved in the project, do they seem to not be aligned with me in how they, in their, I guess reusing the term, in their value system, like they're just not good people. the project is good, but they're not good people. Like you said, you're going to have to be with these people for at least a year. Like every project I've been involved in, it's a 1 year process at the minimum. Like even if nothing happens for the first 6 months, you're still in conversations with them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Next question. So distribution is changing rapidly. Should indie filmmakers still prioritize film festivals, or are there better strategies for getting your film seen and sold? What do you think, Anthony?
I think there's no 100% right answer to this one. I think it depends on the movie. I think if you're making a drama or you're making a much more artsy indie film, I think film festivals are the only way you're going to get your film seen and talked about, because you just can't market those films. And it's nothing against them, but like I've worked on some amazing movies that just would never, they wouldn't sell right if they were just marketed as going straight to streaming. And they're really beautiful films, but they could only be successful at a film festival, and then they get traction from there because they get written up. So I would say that that's a place where film festivals are definitely a good thing. But now if you're making an action movie, or you're making even a horror film might be a bit, maybe you can talk more on that maybe, but like an action movie, there aren't many film festivals where action movies really do anything and really present any value to you. So that one, you might be going straight to some kind of a streaming service right away, because there will always be an audience for action films, but they aren't the same audience that are going to film festivals. That would be my thinking. Is I think you should know what you want from it ahead of time. Like if this is a film festival film, you should know that ahead of time. And if this is not a film festival film, then it doesn't mean you can't apply, but you should know that, okay, our goal is not film festivals. Our goal is this.
Yeah, you definitely have to know what the end goal for your movie is before you roll a frame of film or hit the record button or whatever you're going to do, however you're going to shoot this thing. But I totally agree. If you're making an art house drama, film festivals, that's really the only way to go. You could get some success out of that, and it could end up on a streamer. You'll get written up. Maybe that'll just lead to the next movie, and that's great. That's sort of the goal for all of us, right? One movie should lead to the next. Action movies, there's a ton of distributors out there, period. Internationally, domestically. It's so easy to find a whole bunch of distributors out there, and just email them. Honestly, just write up a list of dozens of distributors, email them. I've done this. I've heard back. I've had meetings with them. This works. And if your action movie aligns with this type of stuff that they want to distribute, I'm sure you can make some sort of a small distribution deal. You may not make all of your money back on it, but your movie will go out there and it will be seen by people. So that's for sure one way. As far as like horror and the movie I'm making right now, we are planning a very small festival run, but we're not relying on festivals at all. It's sort of a bonus at this point. It's a 3 to 6 month festival run. Try to get into some of the major horror festivals like Fantasia or Sitges if we can. But my goal with my movie is to get a theatrical release. That is what I'm working towards. Some sort of a major theatrical release where it could be seen by millions of people. That's the goal with this movie. It's a big, loud, fun theater movie. It's a horror movie. It's a thrill ride. So I don't want it to just go straight to Tubi. I want a theatrical release, and that is what I'm working towards. How we get there, I'll talk about that once we're there. But, that's my end goal.
And I think the overall lesson on all of this is have a plan A at the get-go. That is, if all stars align, this is what the perfect solution for this film would be. That gets you your end result too. Like that's the other side of it, is like if you're making a film that needs to make its money back for investors for all the reasons we talked about, then you need a different plan than if you were funded by Telefilm. For example, if you're 100% funded, or if you're mostly funded by Telefilm, tax credits and grants, you don't need to make your money back. But you do need to make a film then that is good. Then you have to have a purpose for the film, which is the purpose is either to elevate your career, to give you, get your profile up, show that you want a directors, as a director, you can direct a festival film, and hopefully get some awards for your stars and your actors and your departments and things like that. Because that's a great, when you have award-winning films, and especially in the technical awards or in the cast awards and things like that, that's something that makes that helps your film stand out. So those are great places to look at and use an additional marketing material. But I think you've got the right approach with your film, because Like Fantasia is great. There's a couple of other, niche festivals that are great for building that audience and also getting write-ups and people talking about you and blogging about your film. There's tons of horror blogs out there, so that's the place you want to go. And then you've got your theatrical, and that's hopefully what will drive people to the theaters.
All right, last question. Here we go. What's one piece of conventional filmmaking wisdom that's actually terrible advice for indie filmmakers? What do you think? This is interesting.
This is a very good question. I think that I would say that for indie filmmakers, size matters. This might be more of a product of the service industry here in Vancouver, is that we look at all the films that get made around us and we see big crews and we see big circuses and all this other stuff. And when I look at how indie filmmakers in other parts of the world make films, like their footprints are tiny. There's sometimes films that don't have, you barely even know there was a crew there. And I remember from Zach's interview last week where he said, like on day one, they were in a house in Shaughnessy and there was not a single piece of film gear or anything outside of the house that they were filming in. And they made a very good film that went on to be very successful. But they did it because they lived within their means and they made a film within their means. But they didn't try to make a bloated film crew to validate themselves as filmmakers. So I think there is no one right way to make a film. There are definitely conventional ways to schedule and do all these other things. But if you have a good idea for a good way to do something that requires half the money or a third of the money that what the conventional people are telling you to do, go ahead and do it. You can make stuff up as you go along. So I would say that size doesn't matter.
Wait, size matters or size doesn't matter?
Size doesn't matter. Big doesn't mean better.
I totally agree. Yeah, what Zach said about having such a small crew and what they were able to pull off, it just goes to like, don't spread yourself too thin. Don't stretch yourself. Do something smaller, but really, really, really well, rather than trying to add scale to your movie that then you can't really deliver on. So I think that's great advice. I think for me, I've seen so many people that work in the studio system and are trying to just make it in Hollywood, where they just hold on to projects and they have this one script that they've just been fighting to get made for 5 years, but that's like the only thing that they have. No, don't have one project. Have multiple plates spinning all the time. You never know what's going to be the thing that moves forward, and it'll often surprise you. It happened to me multiple times. And so just go out and make it. Don't wait for Hollywood to pick you. Like there's this idea that, well, if Hollywood picks me, then I'm on this track as a filmmaker and I'm going to make Hollywood movies. But do you know what? Go look at all of the successful Hollywood directors out there. Do you know what they did? They made indie movies that then got them recognized by Hollywood. Look at Christopher Nolan. Okay, started with Following, $6,000. Robert Rodriguez, okay, El Mariachi, again, $6,000, something like that. So go out and make your indie with zero crew if you have to. Go out and shoot it yourself, whatever it takes to make these things. And then that will get you the Hollywood dream that you want. But if you just write a script and you're submitting it to studios, to production companies via your agent, and you're just waiting for people to call you back, I'm sorry, but that happens so few and far between. Yeah, I think you just have to go out and make it. And that's what we've been saying for weeks. That's what this podcast is about. But I just see it time and time again. And I see my own friends, and I've talked to them about this. Go shoot a presentation piece of the pilot that you have. No, I don't have time to do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm just going to wait for, my agent to send it to Blumhouse. Okay, well, Blumhouse has their giant slate of projects, and you're nobody. So why don't you go and make your script and become somebody if that's the case? Sorry, I'm feeling a little salty. It drives me crazy. Go out and make shit.
Indie filmmakers, oftentimes, like you and I are in the same boat where we're sort of making films and then trying to make bigger films or trying to make, build up a portfolio. And I think you have to treat each project, have multiple projects going at the same time so that you can kind of like piggyback on what's going to work and what's going to go. But also, treat each project as an end in and of itself. Like, I'm going to make a really good film now. I'm not going to worry about necessarily whether or not it's going to get me, whether or not it's going to turn me into Gareth Edwards or any of these other people who made a low budget monster movie and then they got Star Wars or got Godzilla or something like that. I'm going to make this film. I'm going to make it really good. I'm going to be proud of it. I'm going to get it out in the world. And then I'm going to go and try to make another film just as quickly or just in the same amount of time, like not sitting around waiting for, assuming that because you made a successful movie that Hollywood is going to knock on your door and say, okay, great. Here's your next thing.
100%. Because if you're making it for that reason, it's not going to happen. Make the movie because you want to make the movie as good as possible and make it as good as possible. You can't predict the future, but you can control the quality of the movie that you're making. So if you make a great movie, hopefully get it in front of people, then people will recognize that. And then you get that next step. But if you're making a movie strictly for the idea that somebody's going to give you that next opportunity, you're not going about it the right way. Because
then what you do is you change yourself to try to meet what some other entity needs in order to make you successful. And you're trying to get into permission-based culture, which is something we've been lambasting, I think, for the last 6 months on this podcast, is the idea of not relying on this permission system to validate whether or not you can be a filmmaker or not. I think you make your film, make the best film you can make, and then you release it to the world and go, okay, what did I learn from that? Okay, I'm going to now make my next film, and if any one of these things turns into something great in the future, that's great. But I'm not going to my success and failure and self-worth is not going to be reliant upon whether or not I get the phone call from LA. Yeah, and look at Laura Adkin, episode 3, right? So she didn't get the telefilm money, and she found a way to still make Reuniting herself. And look, they won the Leo last year for best feature film. They had a theatrical release in both the United States and Canada. So total success, right? And she did it because she didn't get picked by telefilm. So go out there and make your movie. How many people can say that they're a movie director, period? Whether or not you made a movie, whether or not you made Star Wars or whether or not you made a movie, it's a privilege to make a movie in the first place. Make a great movie and let history determine where you fit into the category of top 100 or not. Yeah. Well, on that note, that's it for the questions for this week. So again, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com. We're always looking at these, and we'll compile some more. And in a few weeks, we'll do this again. But that was a lot of fun, Anthony. I had a great time. Thanks again, Ken. Good luck with everything the next few weeks. You're deep in production right now, and I'm in pre-production. So we're doing what we talk about. Exactly. Yeah, we're making it happen. All right. See you later. See you later.